Welcome to the Deep Dive. We had a listener ask about the run-up to the Spanish Civil War and how Franco came to power. So today, that's exactly what we're digging into, this really tumultuous time in 20th century Spain.
It's a complex period. We're drawing heavily from an analysis called Rise of Franco, Spanish Civil War. It does a great job looking at the politics, the society, the economy, all the factors that stirred things up.
So let's set the scene a bit. 19th century Spain, it wasn't exactly a powerhouse in Europe anymore.
No, definitely in decline. And internally, just facing so many issues, economic problems, political gridlock, shortages, coup after coup.
Right, and these deep cultural divides too. It sounds like just a state of, well, chronic chaos that bled right into the 20th century.
Exactly. And all those military interventions set a pattern, didn't they? This is how change might happen here.
Which leads us, I guess, to the post-World War I era. Spain, like other places in Europe, saw authoritarian figures emerge.
That's right. You get General Miguel Primo de Rivera in 1923. He launches a coup, makes himself dictator, but interestingly, he keeps King Alfonso III on the throne.
So it's sort of balancing act.
Yeah, tells you something about the power dynamics. Rivera came in promising modernization, but the plans didn't really work out.
And he became more authoritarian.
Yep. And that, predictably, stirred up opposition. Left liberals, intellectuals, they formed the Alianza Republicana.
What were they pushing for, this Alianza?
Basically, a more democratic Spain, secular reforms, more intellectual freedom, sort of the opposite of the traditional conservative power.
Gotcha. Rivera's support eventually crumbled.
Crucially, the army backed away. When that happened, he had to resign in 1930. Left the country, actually.
Wow. Shows how shaky even that kind of rule can be without institutional backing.
Precisely. And then you have this question. Okay, the strongman is gone. Now what? King Alfonso tries to fix things, appoints new governments.
But it wasn't enough.
No, the problems were too deep. He called local elections in April 31, and that was a huge moment. Socialists and liberals swept the big cities.
A clear signal for change.
Definitely. And that victory led straight to the Second Republic being proclaimed on April 14th. Isidro Alcalá Zamora became president. Manuel Azaña formed a government later that year.
So a fresh start. You'd hope it would calm things down, but the analysis says not really.
Yeah, that's the kicker. Instead of healing the wounds, it sort of intensified the chaos. Radical ideologies just flared up.
It sounds like Spain was just incredibly fragmented.
Totally. Monarchists versus Republicans, right versus left, central government versus Catalan, and Basque separatists.
Catholic conservatives versus secularists, order versus anarchists.
Workers versus employers, landowners versus the landless. It's a long list. The middle class versus the wealthy, liberals versus statists, capitalists versus socialists. Just divisions everywhere.
So this new left-leaning government, the Second Republic, they really had their work cut out for them.
Oh, absolutely. And the analysis highlights big challenges. They didn't have enough experienced people in the bureaucracy or the military.
Right.
Their support wasn't universal. Lots of arguments within the coalition itself. And crucially, the right started feeling like the Republic was just trying to eliminate them.
Were there specific policies that fueled that feeling?
Yeah, things like banishing the Jesuits, talking about land nationalization, military purges, giving autonomy to Catalonia. These really fired up the right-wing opposition. It wasn't just politics, it felt existential to them.
And then, as if things weren't complicated enough, the global economy crashes in 1929.
Right, hits Spain hard. And economic desperation, as we know, often pushes people towards radical solutions.
So radical groups gain strength.
Exactly. The Falange Española really starts to grow, founded by José Antonio Primo de Rivera, the son of the old dictator.
Oh, okay.
It was anti-communist, anti-republican, seen as Spain's version of fascists or Nazis, but maybe with a stronger traditional Catholic streak, you know? A small party, but very ideological, ready to jump on the instability.
So heading into the 1936 elections, the atmosphere must have been electric.
Incredibly tense. Polarized doesn't even cover it. The electoral system actually encouraged these big coalitions, which kind of deepened the radical feeling.
How so?
Well, both sides started using apocalyptic language. It was like, if they win, we're finished. Compromise seemed impossible.
That sounds terrifying.
It really was. So the right bands together as the Nationalist Front, mainly around the CETA party, led by Gil Robles. The left forms the Popular Front.
And the election?
Very close. The Popular Front just barely won. Manuel Azaña becomes prime minister, then president.
Okay, a liberal Republican government in charge.
But the radical elements within the Popular Front didn't just sit back. They hit the streets, released prisoners, started talking openly about a socialist republic Republic allied with the Soviets.
Which you can imagine just confirmed the worst fears of the right.
Absolutely, and this is where the military gets really worried. Top conservative officers genuinely feared a communist takeover.
And the government's reaction, exiling suspect officers.
Yeah, people like Francisco Franco, Manuel Goded Lopez, Emilio Mola. They sent them off to posts far from Madrid. Franco to the Canaries, Goded to the Balearics, Mola to Pamplona.
Which sounds like it backfired looking back.
Massively. It was a classic case of unintended consequences. They basically put the key coup plotters in strategic spots. Mola, especially in Pamplona, becomes the main planner.
And they had a figurehead in mind.
General José Sanjurjo, who was in exile in Portugal. Mola also started reaching out to civilian militias, like the Falange, for support on the ground.
So all the pieces are falling into place for a military move.
Pretty much. The government seemed unable, or maybe unwilling, to stop the escalating chaos. So, Mola gives the order. July 18th, 1936. Troops leave their barracks.
But it wasn't a perfectly coordinated thing across the whole country.
No, a bit fragmented at first. You had General Gomez Morato succeed in Spanish Morocco. Franco joined in from Las Palmas, got Falange's support there. Cuerpo de Llano took Seville. Mola held Pamplona.
But not everyone joined.
Right, some units stayed loyal to the Republic, so you even had clashes within the army. And then you throw in the right-wing and left-wing paramilitaries. It got messy fast.
So by the end of July, Spain is basically split.
Yeah, the nationalists control Galicia, Leon, Navarre, northern Aragon. Republicans hold Asturias, the Basque region, and Andalusia is contested.
And so the key for the nationalists, the analysis says, was getting those troops from Morocco over, about 40,000 of them.
That was the absolute crunch point, because by late July, the nationalists had maybe 130,000 forces, but crucially, a lot of experienced officers from the African campaigns.
Compared to the Republican.
They had around 90,000 fewer experienced leaders, so getting that army of Africa to the mainland was make or break for the rebellion, turning into a full-blown civil war.
And even though Spain wasn't a top-tier power, this conflict pulls in the big international players, doesn't it? A testing ground.
Exactly that. The U.S. stayed neutral. France and Britain went for non-intervention.
Which sounds neutral, but maybe wasn't in practice.
Arguably, yeah. It probably helped the nationalists more because they got very direct, very significant support from Mussolini's Italy, Hitler's Germany, and also Portugal.
Let's talk about that support. Hitler and Mussolini weren't shy.
Not at all. Troops, tanks, warships, weapons. Italy sent the Corpo Truppa Voluntari. Germany sent the Condor Legion testing out their new air power, like at Guernica later on.
Were there others supporting the nationalists?
Smaller groups, yeah. Volunteers from Ireland, Romania, Yugoslavia, often driven by anti-communism.
And the Republicans. Who backed them?
The main backer was the Soviet Union. Stalin provided aircraft, tanks, crucial stuff, though his motives were complex,
Sure. Anyone else?
Mexico gave support. Poland, Greece offered a bit. And famously, communist parties worldwide organized the international brigades. Volunteers came from all over to fight for the Republic.
Now, early on, there was a leadership change on the nationalist side.
Yeah, General Sanjurjo, the intended symbolic leader, died in a plane crash right at the start, so Miguel Cabanillas became the initial figurehead.
But the real power lay elsewhere.
With the commanders on the ground, especially Franco, his big challenge and opportunity was getting his troops from Morocco.
Because the Navy stayed mostly loyal to the Republic, right? He was stuck.
Exactly. Until German planes, Junkers, Ju-52s, and Italian ships helped ferry them across the Strait of Gibraltar. Huge boost for the nationalists.
So Franco lands on the mainland. When was that?
August 6, 1936, in Cadiz, then moves to Seville. From there, he splits his forces. General Varela heads into Andalusia. Lieutenant Colonel Yagu takes the main African army units north.
And they moved fast.
Very fast. Captured Merida, Badajoz, heading towards Madrid by early September.
But then Franco makes an interesting detour to Toledo.
Right. Instead of pushing straight for Madrid, he diverts to relieve the nationalists besieged in the Alcázar of Toledo.
Militarily necessary, or more about something else?
Probably more about prestige and propaganda. Lifting the siege successfully really boosted Franco's image as a decisive leader. It was a big PR win.
Meanwhile, Mola is up north, trying to cut off the Republic from France.
Yeah, securing that northern border area in the Basque region was strategically vital for the nationalists.
And all this leads to that meeting in Salamanca in late September.
Correct. The nationalist generals get together and, despite maybe some reluctance from some, they choose Franco. Generalissimo, supreme commander, and head of state, his leadership is basically cemented.
That seems like a key difference between the two sides. The nationalists unified under Franco.
While the Republicans, the Popular Front coalition, were often plagued by infighting and divisions. They formed a government, sure, but keeping everyone on the same page was a constant struggle.
So Franco's in charge, nationalists unified. Next target, Madrid.
Yep. Mola leads the operation in October 36. Fighting reaches the southern suburbs pretty quickly.
But Madrid doesn't fall, despite German and Italian air power.
No, it holds out, becomes this potent symbol of resistance. The Republican government moves to Valencia, hastily throws together defenses under General Miaja.
Using what forces?
A lot of paramilitary groups, communist, anarchist, because they lacked regulars. But crucially, Soviet aid starts arriving planes, T-26 tanks, and the international brigades show up too. That made a huge difference.
So the battle for Madrid itself must have been intense. Nationalists attacking with tanks, planes bombing.
Absolutely brutal. Street fighting, constant air raids from the Junkers and the Italian Savoyas. But the Republicans, with that foreign help and sheer determination, held the line. It was a major morale boost for them and a real setback for Franco's Plan A.
So Plan B Franco shifts strategy.
Yeah, failure at Madrid forces a rethink. He shifts focus to encircling the city, attacking north towards La Coruna to cut off that route.
And they succeeded in cutting that route by early 1937.
Yes, by January 37, the Republicans lost that connection, isolating Madrid further.
And the international involvement keeps ramping up.
Oh yeah, Mussolini sends more troops. Hitler formally sends the Condor Legion to fight. It's becoming less of a Spanish war and more of a European proxy fight.
Were there other nationalist gains around this time? Early 37?
Yes. After taking Zaragoza on the Aragon front, Italian-backed forces grabbed Malaga down south in January, important port city. Each loss chipped away at the Republic.
By February, Franco's planning another go at Madrid. A pincer move this time.
That was the plan. Attack from the south across the Drama River to cut the Valencia road, and attack from the north to take Guadalajara. Coordinated assault.
But it didn't quite work out that way, the Jarama offensive.
Launched February 6th with German support, they crossed the river but got bogged down. Fierce Republican resistance stopped them from cutting the Valencia road. Huge casualties, basically a stalemate. Another setback.
And the northern attack, Guadalajara.
Yeah.
That involved a lot of Italian troops.
Mostly Italian, yeah. The Corpo Trippa Volontari with their Fiat tankettes, they attacked on March 8th. But the Republicans had those Soviet T-26 tanks.
And the Republicans won.
A significant victory for them at Guadalajara, yeah. By the end of March, they'd pushed the nationalists back. Big morale blow for the Italians and for Franco's strategy around Madrid.
So Madrid holds again. These failures must have forced another strategic shift.
They did. Franco decides to prioritize the north, the Republican-held Biscay coast. It looked like the weakest link in the Republican territory.
Who led that northern campaign?
General Mola again. His forces included those Carlist militias from Navarre, the traditionalist monarchists, plus, critically, air support from the German Condor Legion. The offensive kicked off in late March 37.
Intense fighting there.
Very fierce, through April and May. Then, another twist, Mola dies in a plane crash June 3rd.
Another key figure gone. Who took over?
General Davila. He pressed the attack on Bilbao, the big industrial center, and Bilbao fell on June 19th. Major loss for the Republic.
The Republicans must have been desperate to relieve the pressure.
They were. They gathered about 80,000 men and launched a big offensive west of Madrid at Brunet in early July, trying to break the nationalist lines.
How did that go?
Badly. After about 3 weeks of heavy fighting, they made little progress and basically lost the entire attacking force. Huge casualties, another failed offensive.
So with the Brunet offensive defeated, the nationalists just push harder in the north.
Exactly. General Davila regrouped and attacked again in August, pushing into Cantabria. Santander fell on August 24th. The Basque forces surrendered. Republicans retreated into Asturias.
Did the Republicans try anything else to divert them?
Yes. On the same day Santander fell, they launched another counteroffensive, this time towards Zaragoza in Aragon, the Battle of Belchite.
Any success there?
Some initial gains, they took the town of Belchite, but failed to reach Zaragoza, ended up retreating again, more losses.
So the whole Republican North just collapses.
Pretty much. The final pocket in Asturias held out with guerrilla fighting in the mountains, but that fell in October 1937. The entire Biscay coast was lost.
So autumn 1937, Things look pretty bleak for the Republic.
Extremely bleak. Failed offensives at Brunet and Belchite, the entire north lost, and worsening infighting, especially in Catalonia. People started talking about a civil war within the civil war.
What a mess. So as Winter 37 rolls in, how do the two sides stack up?
Franco's forces, based in Burgos, are clearly stronger, lots of German and Italian help. The Republicans in Valencia are struggling with internal conflict, dwindling resources, though interestingly, both sides had huge armies, by now maybe 700,000 men each.
And the Republicans try another offensive, even in winter.
A bold move, yeah. Attacking the nationalist salient at Teruel, they launched it December 15th, middle of winter, and actually captured the city. A rare bit of good news for them.
But Franco reacts.
He does. Against advice from his allies who wanted him to focus on Madrid, he pours resources into retaking Teruel. Months of brutal winter fighting ensue.
And the nationalists eventually take it back.
Yes, Teruel fell back to the nationalists on February 22nd, 1938.
And
a very costly battle for both sides, but ultimately another Republican defeat.
After Teruel, Franco turns his attention.
Where? To Catalonia, the industrial heartland, major Republican stronghold. General Davila leads a huge force, 150,000 troops. The offensive starts March 7th, 1938.
Using what kind of tactics?
Heavy bombing, tanks, infantry. Looked a lot like the German blitzkrieg tactics we'd see later. Fast, overwhelming.
And the Republican defense?
It crumbled. Widespread retreats, desertions. It turned into a rout, really.
How far did the nationalists get?
They reached the Mediterranean at Vinaròs on April 15th. That was huge. It cut the remaining Republican territory in two, north and south zones completely separated.
A strategic disaster for the Republic. Did they try to negotiate then?
They did. In May 38, the government tried to find a settlement. But Franco wasn't interested. He demanded unconditional surrender, no peace talks.
Did Franco push straight for Barcelona then?
Interestingly, no. He hesitated, maybe worried about French intervention if he went for Barcelona immediately. Instead, he diverted forces towards Valencia.
Did that work out?
Not entirely. They actually suffered a defeat north of Valencia that summer. Meanwhile, other nationalist forces were cleaning up pockets in the south, near Portugal.
So this pause, this diversion towards Valencia, maybe gave the Republicans in Catalonia a bit of breathing room.
It seems so. The French border reopened temporarily, allowing some supplies in. The Republicans managed to scrape together their remaining forces for one last massive effort.
The Battle of the Ebro.
Exactly. Their final gamble. Hoping a big victory could change the tide, or at least improve their bargaining position.
When did that start?
July 25th, 1938. The Republican Army crossed the Ebro River, completely surprising the nationalists. It kicked off the biggest, bloodiest battle of the whole war.
How long did it last?
Brutal fighting raged until October. Massive casualties on both sides.
But who won?
Ultimately, the nationalists. The Republicans suffered maybe 50,000 casualties, devastating losses, and were forced back across the Ebro. They were basically spent after that.
So after the Ebro, the path to Catalonia was open for Franco.
Pretty much. Despite their own heavy losses at the Ebro, the nationalists, with their superior resources and foreign aid, assembled an overwhelming force for the final push.
How big a force are we talking?
Around 340,000 soldiers, 300 tanks, 500 aircraft, loads of artillery. The Republicans could only muster about 220,000 men, poorly equipped, few tanks, maybe 250 artillery pieces. The odds were just impossible.
When did the final Catalonia offensive begin?
December 23rd, 1938. The nationalist advance was incredibly fast.
Barcelona.
Fell on January 25th, 1939. Reports say nationalist paramilitaries carried out terrible looting and violence against the population. A really dark chapter.
And many people fled.
Huge numbers. Over 500,000 Republicans and Catalans escaped across the border to France, becoming refugees. The whole Catalonia campaign was over by February 10th, 1939.
With Catalonia gone, the Republic was finished, wasn't it?
Essentially, yes. President Zanya resigned after Britain and France officially recognized Franco's government. Prime Minister Negrin came back to Madrid, tried to rally resistance, but it was hopeless. The front had just collapsed.
Did anyone try to negotiate an end?
Some Republican generals formed a junta, tried to get peace terms from Franco, but he just pushed on.
So the nationalists just rolled into Madrid.
Entered unopposed on March 28th. By March 31st, every remaining Republican town had fallen. The last units surrendered.
And the official end?
April 1st, 1939. Franco announced his victory on the radio. The war was over. And his dictatorship began, lasting until his death in 1975.
So Wrapping this deep dive up, we've gone from that initial instability, the deep ideological splits, the military coup,
Through the internationalization, the brutal battles, Madrid, the North, the Ebro, Catalonia, and finally, the total Republican collapse.
It's just a tragic story, isn't it? The human cost of that polarization, the destruction of the war itself, made worse by foreign intervention and all the internal fighting.
Absolutely. Hopefully for you listening, this has given a clearer picture of how complex it all was, the key moments that shaped the outcome and led to Franco's long rule.
And it really makes you think, doesn't it? How do these deep historical fault lines in a society get so inflamed? How can things spiral into such devastating conflict?
Yeah, and are there lessons there or parallels maybe when we look at deep divisions in other places, other times, even today? Something important to chew on.